You ready to fetch? Go get it. Welcome back to the Catholic Men's Podcast, helping you find good works of literature for the Catholic gentleman. My Fight with a Mountain Lion, a true 1800s Maine survival story by Alan French. We live in a time when some men still live in their parents' basements, and the greatest crisis they face is the Wi-Fi going out or not being able to skip an extra long YouTube ad. Tonight, I invite you back to another time when men left the comforts of their home, braved the wintry woods, and risked life and limb for the thrill of the hunt. This is one of the wildest stories in American frontier lore, and I dedicate this episode to St. Hubert, patron saint of hunters. Now, this story was originally published in the late 1800s, so instead of saying mountain lion, the author actually used the outdated term catamount. So I've replaced it with names like mountain lion or cougar, although it was originally titled My Fight with a Catamount. Go get it. His story begins. My guide Alaric and I had gone in after moose to the country beyond Mud Brook in Maine. Our task was a slow one. We had to examine each snow-covered valley for moose tracks, tramping up one side and down the other, or as we usually managed it, separating at the valley's mouth, each taking a side, meeting at the end, and then, if unsuccessful, taking the quickest way back to camp. And unsuccessful we were, since for 3 days we found no trail, but Alaric was not in the least discouraged. "You can never tell about moose," he said. "They travel so. There were moose in this country before the snow, and there are moose within a day's walk of us now. It's just as I told you. We may have to spend 5 days finding where they are." It was on the second day that we found that, while after moose, we had been tracked by a mountain lion. The print of its paw was generously large. "I've seen bigger," said Alaric, "but this fella's big enough. He's just waiting round, I guess, so as to get some of the meat we kill. We'll remember him," he said, looking up at me as he knelt on the snow, "so as to see that he doesn't spoil the hide or the head." I accepted the theory and thought little more of it for the next 24 hours. At the end of the third day, we found that the cougar had, for a second time, been following our trail. Not only our trail, but also mine. He had followed me all day as I walked along the hillside. Alaric examined his tracks carefully for half a mile. "He was in sight of you all the way," he said. "See here, where he stood for some time, just shifting about in one place, watching." I saw and thought. After a while, it seemed to me, a mountain lion might get tired of waiting for us to kill his meat, and would start in to kill it for himself. Unquestionably, the easiest game for him to get would be human, for there were no deer in the region. The previous severe winter had decimated the partridges, and big is the cougar that will tackle a moose. I mentioned the theory to Alaric. "Yes, perhaps," he said, and eyed me dubiously. Then I wished I hadn't said anything. It's not well to let your guide think you're afraid. In the morning, we had attained our valley's mouth. Alaric was about to keep with me, instead of leaving me as before, but that made our hunting much slower, for we could cover much less ground, and I sent him around the other way. "All right," he said, "but keep a good lookout behind you now." He disappeared in a cedar swamp, and I made my way along the slope of a hill. I watched indeed behind me, as well as in front, and in every fox's track I crossed I saw a cougar's, until finally I got used to the situation and believed that the Indian devil had concluded to let me alone. The day was fine. The sun shone bright, and the softening snow dropping from the upper branches of the trees kept up a constant movement in the woods. I took and held a good pace, and with my eyes searching the snow ahead and on all sides of me for signs of moose, walked for a full hour, seeing nothing living but the woodpeckers and the chickadees, hearing nothing but the rustle of the branches. As released of their loads, they sprang back into place. Then, quite needlessly, I found insecure footing under the snow and plunged suddenly at full length. My rifle whirled from my hand with force, and I heard it strike against the uncovered top of a sugarloaf stone. I jumped up in fear and hastily examined it. The breech was shattered. My rifle was as useless as a stick. Now I thought of the Cougar, as with the broken rifle in my hands, I looked about me in the woods, bright with sun and snow. I was not entirely helpless, for my revolver and knife were in my belt. Yet a .38 caliber revolver, even with a long cartridge and a long barrel, isn't a sure defense against an animal as heavy as myself, which, in facing me, would present for a mark only a round head and a chest with muscles so thick and knotty that they would probably stop any revolver bullet. I doubted my ability to hit the eye. Very likely I was no longer followed, and in any case I might call Alaric. And yet he was too far away for a shout to reach him, and I dared not fire signal shots, for in order to travel light, I had left at camp all revolver cartridges but those in the chambers. So I started at once for the bottom of the valley, hoping to strike Alaric's trail on the opposite slope, and intending to follow it until I caught him. My rifle I left where it was. It was useless and heavy. I cast many a glance behind me. Almost at a trot, I made my way down the long hillside. I strode on rapidly, for I had certainly a mile to cover before I could strike Alaric's trail, much more before I could catch my nimble guide. I was cheerful and unalarmed until, pausing to look behind, I saw 100 yards away a tawny animal quickly slip behind a tree. Go get it! I hastily drew my revolver and knife, but no movement came from its hidden breast, and rather than stand and wait, I pursued my retreat. I moved more slowly, yet as fast as I could, and still guard myself against another fall and watch for a rush from behind. I scanned the ground in front of me and glanced back every second. For some time I saw no more of the mountain lion, but when I did see him, I was startled at his nearness. He was within 50 yards. I hurried on as he slipped aside again, but looking again in a moment, I saw him now following boldly upon my trail. I stopped, but he stopped too, and stood regarding me. He was too far away for me to fire yet, and as he made no movement to approach, I cautiously continued my retreat, always after a few steps stopping to face him. He stopped as I stopped, yet each time I turned away, he quickly came closer. I was already thinking of awaiting him without further movement when the way was blocked by a ravine. It was cut by the stream that drained the valley, and its steep sides were nearly 15 feet in height. They even overhung in places, but I didn't know this then. I was in no mind to trust myself in the deep gully where the cougar might drop upon me before I could scramble out upon the other side. I walked into an open space and took my stand close to a birch that grew on the very edge of the bank. For 30 feet there was no good cover for the mountain lion, so, armed and determined, I awaited his action. The animal skirted the bushes about me as if examining the ground, and to my disappointment began to come upon me along the edge of the ravine. This gave him the best cover before his charge, and at the same time assured him that the momentum of his rush would not carry him tumbling into the gully. Always keeping too well concealed for a good mark, he crept up behind a fallen tree on the near side of which a little bush grew, and flattened himself there, watching me, I felt sure, and waiting, in the hope that he might catch me off my guard. I cannot describe how stealthy and noiseless and altogether perfect his maneuvering was. Go get it! Although the trees that grew about were all small and the bushes bare, and although the white snow gave no background for concealment, he covered himself so perfectly at one time and slipped in and out of sight so quickly at another that although I stood with revolver pointed and cocked, I could find no opportunity for a shot. As he circled for his position, he came even nearer, and I could see at one time the round head with its short, pointed ears, and at another the long, sinuous, muscular body, but they moved so rapidly that before I could shoot, they were gone from sight. All the time he made no sound but a little rustle. In his final concealment, I saw nothing of him but his tail that twitched and twitched and twitched. At last I caught the glint of his pale green eye and fired. There came a snarl from behind the bush, and it was dashed to one side and the other, while round head and bared teeth and tawny body came crashing through. I pulled the trigger again, and the report sounded muffled, and the smoke for an instant obscured the beast. All was white when, like a breath, it passed, and I saw the rushing mountain lion not 10 feet from me. I had not time to fire or crouch, but with ready legs hurled myself to one side and threw my left arm around the tree that grew at the edge of the bank. With an awful dread, I felt the ground giving way beneath me. I dropped my knife and caught the tree closer when it too leaned to fall. It hung for a moment over the steep slope, and I couldn't save myself. With a twist, the tree and I fell together. I clutched my revolver desperately, despite the sickening fear of the fall, and in my grasp it exploded in midair, which I presume means he unintentionally fired. Then I fell, and although my body struck easily in the snow-covered ravine, my right hand had been beaten against a sharp rock, and the birch was upon me so that I couldn't move. My legs were on the bank, and underneath the snow beneath my shoulders I soon felt the ice from which stones protruded. One snow-covered rock received and supported my head. I lay upon my right side, and my right hand, swinging in a curve, had struck with force upon another stone, and lay upon the ice, the only part of my body except my head which was free. My left arm was pressed close to my side by the birch, which lay across my body and legs. My fall confused me somewhat, and I couldn't at first feel anything, either the pain in my hand or the danger I was in. I noticed only the fine powdery snow which, cast up by the fall, settled upon me as I lay. Then I saw my arm stretched out in front of me, with a bloody hand at the end of it, and I came fully to myself. A pain shot from fingertip to shoulder as I closed my hand tighter upon the butt of the revolver. But I clenched my teeth and tried to rise, tried twice more before I gave it up as hopeless. Then I raised my hand and put it in a better position, propped up upon a stone. The movements hurt me terribly, but I thought of the mountain lion, which would surely not be satisfied with 2 bullets for its breakfast. I was scarcely ready when the head of the beast was thrust over the edge of the bank to look for me. He saw and gloated as a human enemy might have done. His savage snarl was full of intelligence, and his slow approach was deliberate torture. He stood for a moment in full view, then slipped and slid down to the surface of the ice, where 10 yards away he stood and looked at me. I saw his magnificent build, his superb muscular development, as with his body in profile, his head turned toward me, he waited before approaching, playing with my helplessness. But I was not entirely helpless. With shaking hand, I took aim. I could not use my thumb to cock the revolver, but drew hard at the trigger, and the hammer rose and fell. My turn for gloating had come now, for the cougar was crying with rage and pain. He fell writhing, striking with his forepaws at the snow, and raising his head to snap at nothing. But this didn't last long. Slowly he dragged himself to a sitting posture, and I could understand his plight and estimate my own danger. My first 2 bullets had but torn his flesh. My last had broken his back. He was paralyzed in his hind legs, as I have seen a deer, yet he had many minutes to live, perhaps hours, and was strong and angry enough to finish me. Painfully he started on that short journey to me. With his forepaws, his claws digging the snow, he began to drag himself toward me. I could only wait. I had but one more shot and wished to hold it till he should be close, but my torn hand was weak, and the bruised tendons had already begun to stiffen. Into that deep place where bank and trees overhung, the sun didn't come, and I felt the cold striking into my raw flesh. More than that, my weight upon my shoulder began to cut off the blood from my arm. I felt pricking in my flesh. My arm began to numb, and I feared that I might not be able to shoot. I saw with satisfaction that he would have to turn aside for one of the rocks in his path. When at last he reached it and began to drag himself around it, he gave me my last chance. I saw the space behind his shoulder, prayed that my bullet might miss his ribs, summoned the last force at my almost dead hand, and fired. A little drift of air blew the smoke aside so quickly that I could see the fur fly. He He bit savagely at his side, but he crawled on without stopping. From my numb hand, the revolver fell without noise in the snow. My fight was finished. He came on. He was only 15 feet away from me when he stopped and coughed. Would he sink, unable to move farther? No, he started again. Although his legs dragged behind him, although he left a red trail on the snow and each step forced a snarl from him, he came on. Even as he turned toward my hand to seize it, even as I waited to see rather than feel the crunching of my senseless arm, his head drooped. Then he raised it once more, but his power was gone. He laid his head, once so powerful, upon my hand, rested his body against the stone that stood high enough to support him, and glared at me with his fierce, malignant eyes. Then the fire changed in his eyes, clouded, flickered, glowed, went out. The last breath was expelled with a wheeze. He was dead. Then my own power sank, and I thought that I was dying too. Somewhere in the midst of my faintness, I had a sense as if I felt, rather than heard, hasty, heavy footsteps on the bank above me. As soon as I knew anything clearly, I knew that the tree had been pulled away and that Alaric was bending over me. He had, with ears alert for any sound, came rushing to my aid at the first revolver shot. But the distance was so great that he didn't arrive until my fight was over. Thank you all so much for listening, and if you'd like to hear more hunting stories like this one, just click on the playlist above me here. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you.